Gary, let's take a moment and say thank you to our sponsors at Fuji Sport.
Yeah, absolutely.
They've been working with us for a very long time, not only on this podcast, but also at the Academy. And I'm taking a peek at their website right now, and they have a brand new ultra light gi. Now, this is mind-blowing. I'm looking at my size. A2 is 2.75 pounds. I mean, that's under 3 pounds. That's mind-blowing.
I could even lift that. And go to their website, fujisports.com. Check it out. Anything you could need for your jiu-jitsu journey, you can find at fujisports.com.
Hey, it's been a while since we started RŌL TV project.
It's been a while since you started it. I did come in later, and I can't say enough about it, especially the new platform. It's really amazing, fully customizable, and you know a little bit more about the structure.
Well, so 2 things you need to know. One is the subscription service, which is $9 a month. You can get access to hundreds of videos, hundreds of drills, techniques, and so on in a very nice library categorized as you need them. But 2 different lessons. You can actually purchase those individually and you own them. So the subscription is not tied to it at all. You can look at things like spider guard, half guard sweeps, half guard chokes, folding pass, and so on. There's so many of them out there. So take a look and see where you need help with the videos, right? 30% if you type in RŌL Radio as a code.
Who doesn't like saving money? Go to rolacademy.tv. What's up, everyone? Welcome back. If you haven't already, please remember to hit the like, share, subscribe, download, listen, and whatever other button there is, and leave us a review wherever you do listen. That ensures that we can continue bringing you the great guests and amazing content that you have come to expect. On this episode, Paul Sharp discusses old school versus modern day training, coaching the competitor and the hobbyist, and the challenges of motivating both, his long and deep journey in martial arts, and so much more. Here's the RŌL Radio with retired law enforcement officer, self-defense expert, certified instructor in the Filipino martial arts and Jeet Kune Do concepts, Chris Haueter black belt, and straight blast gym instructor, Paul Sharp.
Welcome to RŌL Radio.
And we're live.
Yeah, here we go.
Here we go again.
Again. You want to get right to the tap cancer out?
No, I wanted to see how you're doing.
I'm all right. I don't know. I'm the same as I was 9 hours ago when I saw you.
You can't even make a small talk with you. You're so business-like. You all get to the point.
I want to get to the point.
Get to the point.
I spend so much time with you. There's like this crosstalk is so sometimes fake that it's like, how am I doing? I don't know. I talked to you 9 hours ago.
January. We didn't talk today yet. What are you talking about?
I said 9 hours ago.
Oh, well, yeah.
Right? Something like that.
We're like BFFs. We can hang out all the time.
So, Tap Cancer Out. The charity tournament series is back, and they are heading to 9 more cities throughout the fall. They're stopping this weekend. Actually, it'll already be over, but in Chicago, we got quite a few people competing, so I hope they did really well. But what is coming up soon is Jacksonville, Philadelphia, and Massachusetts. They've actually got 2 days in Massachusetts. They've got the youth on the 19th of November, and on the 20th, they've got the adults. So definitely go there, register. They're looking to donate another $1.2 million to all their beneficiaries. Fundraising and registration is open for all the events, so you don't have to wait. So head over to www.tapcancerout.org/tournaments to find your city and sign up. And when this is airing, that they already visited Chicago, yes.
So that's coming up actually this weekend as we are recording this. But I was actually messaging with John the other day, and
cool.
And, he's pretty stoked. I'm hoping to actually connect with him in person at the event, so we'll see. I'm sure he's going to be busy, but
yeah. He's a busy dude.
Yeah, what a great event, great impact. As they are making all throughout the jiu-jitsu community. So we're glad to be part of it. Shall we begin?
Yeah, absolutely.
Another pioneer. Another individual who has made and continues making a huge impact, Paul Sharp. Thank you for being here. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's my honor, man. So before we even started, we were talking, we had a couple laughs. We just recently had Chris Haueter for a seminar at my academy. You can't even stop laughing. Why are you laughing? This is serious business. Chris Haueter is the man, no?
He is. But he's such a character. I love Chris.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorite people.
Yeah. What do you remember when you guys met the very first time?
I do. We met in Portland, Oregon at Straight Blast Gym Camp, and he was there for the training, and he was the first.
What year was this?
98 or 99. And he was the first American black belt I had met, and first American based black belt. So he's one of the Dirty Dozen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was one of the first American black belts I met who encouraged me to include wrestling into my jiu-jitsu. Prior to that, my instructors were more traditional Brazilian jiu-jitsu based instructors and excellent instructors, but I'd always been encouraged to not wrestle. And I grew up wrestling, and Chris grew up wrestling. So running into Chris kind of changed my game. It put me more into a path of a hybrid jiu-jitsu athlete where, because Chris he's done Muay Thai and he's done boxing, and he's a fan of all things fighting and judo. And so Chris encouraged me to include those things. And that was the first time I heard him say what he's famous for saying now, which is, you want to think about the street because that's what brings us into jiu-jitsu is self-defense. But you also want to train the sport, because if all we ever were concerned about was street fighting, I would just teach you how to cover and crash, like keep your head, keep yourself from getting knocked out, enter safely to a clinch, to some sort of body lock, take them down, ground and pound them. You got it. We're done. And then maybe teach you how to use some weapons, and we're good. Now you know everything you need to know. And then the journey would be very short and boring. But Chris said, once you understand how to fight, then you need to train this sport, because you can train this sport forever. And there's always going to be something to discover, something to find. I mean, I remember like 2018 or 17, and Chris is a little older than me, and he's banged up, because he's just a monster. And he is showing me like this Berimbolo series that he really likes for getting to the back or getting onto people's legs. And this is a guy who's an old school, Dirty Dozen OG guy, but he's still curious and intrigued by the innovations and the things that people are coming up with and finding, and this new movement patterns and all these things. And so Chris was telling me like, hey, you're going to train the sport, because that will keep you in this forever. This will keep you intrigued and curious forever. But at some point, you have to practice the art, which means you have to create your expression of jiu-jitsu, kind of what Bruce Lee talked about with the Jeet Kune Do concepts, where it's your individual expression. And my jiu-jitsu is not going to look like yours, and yours isn't going to look like mine. And there will be similarities based on fundamental movement patterns, but how we go about it. And that's why you have ADCC, where you have these people from different camps who don't look the same, but they all win, because what we're seeing is their expression of their art, their jiu-jitsu at the highest level at Jiu-Jitsu Olympics, right? Like ADCC is basically our Olympics. And you see these guys expressing their art at such a high level. And so Chris was very adamant that the things that have brought me to this point should remain. So I was a wrestler to begin with and a judo guy to begin with. And to abandon those things because it somehow doesn't fit with what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu should look like is not optimal for me. And so Chris was like, man, just figure out how to incorporate it. There's bad habits in judo and there's bad habits in wrestling that will hurt, not bad habits, but things that'll hurt you in jiu-jitsu, right? Like in wrestling, I never want to go to my back. And so what happens? They get on my back, because I'm, sprawled out trying to play turtle and quarter or whatever, and they're throwing hooks in and getting on my neck. So just figure those things out. Don't do that. So that's where the hybrid thing comes in. And that's also where it becomes your art. If you have a guy that's been wrestling forever You don't tell him don't wrestle ever again. These are the modifications you need to make for your wrestling to jujitsu, and now learn some jujitsu. Learn jujitsu completely, And so that was my first, and that was pivotal for me as far as my jujitsu at that point too. To run into Chris in the late '90s and have him just tell me like, "Listen, you have 15 years of wrestling. Why would you not wrestle?"
And at that point in 98 or 97, when you meet Chris, how long of an experience, how much of an experience of jiu-jitsu do you have?
About 4 years. So I started in 93. So yeah, early in 93. So Hurricane Andrew happened in August or September of 92, I think, if I remember right. Might be a little bit off on my dates, and so then I started training jiu-jitsu shortly after that. So
I have so many questions right now on like 25 different topics, but staying with this for a moment. Okay. So just to establishing that timeline, 93, that's UFC 1.
Yes.
Does UFC 1 take place prior to you starting or afterwards?
It took place just prior to me. So I had just seen it. Does UFC have an impact on you starting, or I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out. So so your interest comes before jiu-jitsu is on a international platform. Yeah, so it was before that. So we had done a seminar with a guy named Paul Vunak.
Oh yeah,
and he taught. So I was a full instructor with him, and in Jeet Kune Do concepts, I was a full instructor in Jeet Kune Do concepts and the Filipino martial arts, and I was always looking for different ways to supplement my fighting system and make myself better and understand better the 4 ranges as taught in Jeet Kune Do. And there was a training partner who told me about Rickson Gracie. And so we're like, Rickson Gracie? I'm like, all right, that's cool, man. And he goes, yeah, it's this cool fighting stuff that you see in the UFC. And I had watched the first UFC just out of curiosity, but I had no idea really what I was looking at. I was still looking at it through the lens of Jeet Kune Do concepts and wrestling and judo. And so it was an opportunity to do a seminar. And so we did a seminar with Rickson, and that blew my mind. And so that really started the journey for me. I asked, like, is there anybody here that teaches this stuff? Because Vunak had showed us, when he came through and did his seminar, he showed us a basic sweep from the guard, an armbar from the guard, and then a mount escape. And I thought it was amazing. I thought this stuff is so cool. And so we would drill that, but we really didn't have anything else to do other than those handful of things that he had shown at his seminar.
I mean, you were talking about times where, first of all, there was handful of Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioners in the U.S. Handful, and I mean,
yeah, maybe
few, right? Rickson was around. Yeah. I think Haueter was around. I know Carly was around. I'm missing few probably, but like Machado Brothers, I think they were around at that time, right? But like, this was really not accessible. So
if you were a blue,
go ahead.
Yeah, if you were a blue belt back then, you were a god. There was nobody.
I'll take this ball to the next level. When I was starting and you were blue belt, you were a god. I remember when I started in 2000, which is a decade after you. I'm blue belt. Damn, we going to Ohio. Road trip.
Yeah, for sure, man. And that was how it was. And so we would train this stuff and mess around with it. And Vunak just, we didn't really roll so much as we just kind of goofed around a little bit, and he wrecked everybody with the little bit of jiu-jitsu that he had. And so I was sold on it, convinced it was a necessary thing. I just couldn't find anybody. And then we went to the Rickson seminar, and Rickson pointed to Conan Sauvé. So one of Carlson's black belts was in Miami at the time. So we started training with him. We were training at a place called Lord's Gym, which is a boxing gym. A lot of good guys come through there. So like Macho Camacho was there, Roberto Duran, Razor Ruddock. There's a bunch of really high-level boxers walking around there every day. The Cuban Olympic boxing coach was the head coach there. And so that's where we were training to work on our stand-up. And we didn't really have any ground at all. So Cuba, in Havana, Little Havana, right? So Hialeah, they have a bunch of old Cuban judo guys that are just monsters. They are horrendous. And so I would train with those guys a couple times a week and just get beat up. I mean, their level of judo is so far beyond what I had done prior to that. And so when I got the opportunity to train with Conan, I jumped on it, and it was brutal. And because those guys were all competing, that's when kind of Horian and those guys had the UFC, and a bunch of the Carlson guys, like Carlson Jr., and those guys all competed on a separate event. I think it was called Extreme Fighting Organization or Extreme something, but that was being held in that area. And so you had like Bart Vale and all these different guys compete on that one. And so it was kind of like the rivalry with the UFC. And so those guys were all preparing, like Alan Goes and all those guys were preparing for fighting. And so every day was just a war. It was awesome, but at the same time, it was horrendous. And, but so that was my intro to jiu-jitsu. And that's where I trained for the first few years. And then when I moved to the Chicago area to take a job in law enforcement, that's when I met Chris. So I met him at a camp because I was kind of on my own for a little while. The closest gym to me was probably an hour if I was lucky with traffic because of Chicago traffic, So trying to do that every day, make that commute every day. So that's a 2-hour commute in addition to training time, 2 small children, starting a new career, all this other stuff. It just wasn't working out for me. I tried it. I did it for a little bit. And then eventually I just kind of I was a blue belt and I just formed my own little training group in the area I was living in at the time. So it was, like you said, right? Like if you're a blue belt back then, you're a god. I basically would just have people just hold me down because they couldn't do anything else with me. And so like I would have to teach them, here's what side control looks like, here's what mount looks like, here's what whatever looks like. Now just try to hold me down for 5 minutes. And then I'd get out, reset, because they didn't know submissions or anything. But it was the only way I could get my training in. So yeah, that was kind of my journey in the beginning of my jiu-jitsu.
Training much different back then versus what it is today.
Yeah, very different. Yeah, very different. So different, And yeah, this is so.
Well, I can tell by your face expression that there's a lot of memories there just coming back right now.
There
right?
is, man. Lots of good memories, man.
But if you were to summarize it in a sentence or two, for those who have no idea what the training looked like back then, many of the listeners are starting today. Maybe they have started the last 6 months. And listen, framing this in, jiu-jitsu is not, it's complex. There's a lot of layers. There's a lot of variables. And many, and I think more people quit jiu-jitsu than more people actually do it long term. Unfortunately, when you look at the global picture. Yet today, I feel that jiu-jitsu is much more simplified for a student than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. Give me a glimpse of what training looked like way back in 90s or early 2000s when you were getting your toes, wet in this whole craziness.
Yeah, so we would come in, we would warm up. Sometimes the warm-ups weren't too bad. Sometimes they were really bad, according to what kind of day they were having. We would do our warm-ups, lots of calisthenics and stuff, and nothing really has anything to do with jiu-jitsu, and definitely not a sport-specific warm-up. So we would do our warm-ups, and then they would teach us whatever the technique was that they were working on that day. So say, let's just for simplicity's sake, say armbar from guard. So we would do armbar from guard, and we would do the armbar from guard without a whole lot of resistance for probably 15 minutes, and then they would turn the timer on, 5-minute rounds, and they're like, let's go. And then it would just be on. We would just go at it, and we would just roll. And so we would do probably an hour of rolling. So it was a 90-minute class. So you'd have like 30 minutes of warm up and then a drill, a technique, and then probably an hour of just 5-minute rounds rolling with everybody, just getting after it, killing each other. And although we did build skill, I also feel like we left a lot on the table, because if we're playing basketball and I tell you, like, this is the basketball, hold it in your hands. Okay, cool. There's the hoop. You have to put the ball in the hoop and I'm going to stop you. But you don't know how to dribble. You don't know how to move. You don't even know how to shoot. And I just keep smacking the ball out of your hand and shooting and making and you're standing there and then the score is 21-0 or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, good game, bro. And you walk off going, what just happened to me? And that happened over and over and over again, and not just in one school, but in many schools that I visited, that would happen. And then we would sit there and scratch our heads, why people quit. Why aren't there more people here? I've been here for 3 months and there's probably been a new person or two every day, especially every time the UFC would come out, there would be new people come in, and then they would last like one day, maybe, if they even make it through the warm-ups. And then next day, same thing, and then I look back on it now, I'm still friends with the guys that I started with back in Miami. There's a handful of us and we talk about it all the time. There probably was 200 people come through that never stayed because you just get thrown into that shark tank and you have no skill. You have no idea what you're doing. But that's how it was back then. And, there was a meme going around on social media where it showed like instructors in 1996. Have you seen that one where it's like instructors in 1996 when new guy walks on the mat with his shoes on and the instructor goes off, like throws the guy and submits him and screams at him, don't ever wear your shoes on the mat. And then instructors now, when a guy walks on the mat with his shoes and they're like, hey, buddy, easy, no shoes on the mat. Okay, all right, buddy, good. And it's like, the difference, I think, but those memes are funny because it's kind of how it was, like if you rolled a little rough, then the mat enforcer was sent your way and he would teach you a lesson about rolling rough. And a lot of times those guys didn't know any better, because you have a white belt who's just been getting beat up for months by all the upper belts. And then there's a new white belt, and then he gets to roll with that new white belt. So he does what's being done to him for the last 3 months, except he's not good at it. He's a spaz and doesn't have technique. So he just grinds his elbows on their face or skull rides them or cranks their head real hard or something silly. But he doesn't know anything. That's all he knows. And so he pops off the new guy, and then here comes the mat enforcer to teach him a lesson about being rough with the new guy. It's like, that doesn't,
it's like a spiral.
It's just a downward spiral that doesn't go anywhere positive. And so I think we've learned a lot from those days as far as how to coach better, how to treat new people better. I think we've also learned that sports science is a thing. Every other sport, they have drills, they run patterns, they run sequences, they run sport-specific warm-ups and cool-downs and all these things that are necessary to build the skill. And you can't fight without skill. And jiu-jitsu, I feel like jiu-jitsu kind of lagged behind. Like judo always had ichikomi, so repetition method, right? Thousands and thousands of reps before you randori. Wrestling always had micro matches. When I was a little kid wrestling, we had what we call micro matches, which were you start with the single leg and go from there. And then if they get loose, then you reset. Or if you get the takedown, you reset. And so you had these situational, skill-specific little matches. And boxing, same thing, right? Like they work patterns, they work sequences, they work their combinations before they turn them loose in a sparring session. And even football and basketball, right? You run plays. You don't just scrimmage all the time. And I think that's the difference. So back then, it was just more barbaric, more like get it on and the strongest survive. And
there was nothing friendly about it.
No, not at all, man. Jiu-jitsu is not for everybody, and maybe it's just not for you, bro. So, you can't hang.
I remember, first of all, two stories come to my mind, but one, I said this on the show, I was told on continuous basis, all the time, you will never be a black belt. If you want to be a black belt, just quit right now. Just go home. Just go home.
Yeah.
Go home.
Yeah.
Get out of here. It'll never happen. Like, it happened on and again, with all the respect to all my instructors, I love them to this day, but that was the message that was really, truly sent.
Mm-hmm.
That black belt is not in your reach. This is, it's way too far out there. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And the second, and I think I said this before, but there's this story came to my mind when you were talking about that meme. True story right here. We are trained. This is way back 20 years ago, but we are rolling, we are training, and somebody comes into the class late, and and the instructor's like, "What are you doing?" Blah, blah, blah. The whole thing yells at that guy, and like everybody stops. Look what's going on. And then, so the guy like gets, he gets small, like this small,
yeah,
and then the instructor noticed that he didn't have flip flops on. Oh shit!
Oh man,
yeah, things just went down the hill from there. Get out of here! Get back to the locker room. What are you doing with bare feet? The whole thing. So the guy goes back to the locker room. He comes up back into the mat or towards the mat area with his outdoor shoes. Oh my God! Things even get worse. It just went down the hill from there. What are you doing? What do you think? Get out of here. Go home. This and that. So, like,
did you go to his funeral?
Man, I'm telling you guys, life was so much different way back in the day. So I'm glad you're bringing some of these stories up, because I do really, truly believe that we are kind of spoiled today.
We are. We are. People have no idea. People have no idea. I'll tell people when I have people come in late, I tell them, like, I'm glad you're here. I'd rather you be here than not come. I'd rather you come late than not come, because I want you to get what jiu-jitsu can do for you. But I remember the opposite, right? Yeah. Like, you show up a little bit late, or, in the middle of warm-ups, like, you have to go use the washroom, or you start to get sick because this is like your 400th burpee. Yeah. And you're just starting to get sick, and you run off the mat, and they're just like, hey, if you don't want to train, if you're not serious, then leave. Yeah. Leave. Yeah. Like throwing your, it was crazy. And people don't understand. And I do understand where they came from. A lot of our instructors back then, they also were competing, on a regular basis. They also were fighting. Yeah. And they also were still of the mindset that jiu-jitsu is for fighting. Yeah. They didn't treat it as a sport. Yes. They treated it as it is fighting. It is serious business. And if you're not serious about this, I remember listening to instructors say things like, if you walk out of here tonight and you got in a fight, are you going to have this attitude? Is this how you defend your life if you walk out of here tonight? And so it was serious business. I get where they came from. I get their mentality. And sometimes I have that mentality, and I have to rein it in a little bit, because I've always been in competitive environments. I've always been in environments where I've been told, hey, man, there's 30 guys that want your spot right now, so keep screwing up. We'll replace you. I've always been in places where it hasn't been said to me, thankfully, but I've heard it said, and I've watched it said to other guys where, hey, that dude's slipping a little bit. He's getting out of shape. He's not taking care of himself. Well, I guess he doesn't want to be here. And there's 35 other dudes that want his spot. So carry on, And so it was, sometimes my internal dialogue is push harder, drive harder. Sometimes if I hear people laughing and joking on the mat, that old thing will kick in, like, hey man, what are you doing? Like, first off, you're screwing up the technique. You're not getting it right. And then you're going to sit over there and jaw jack like you're good enough to jaw jack right now. You should be concentrating and drilling. And I know for sure that you're not doing 100 reps. I told you I want a minimum of 300 reps out of this drill. And I know you're not even to 100. And so that side of me will start to come out. And I have to remember, Marcus Aurelius said that to hold yourself to the harshest standards, but allow some leeway for other people, right? Like, be gentle with others. So be harsh on yourself and gentle with others. And so I have to remember that where I came from in wrestling and in early days of jiu-jitsu, it was very harsh, very unforgiving. and very much like hustle harder. What's wrong with you? Hustle harder. Like work through being injured, work through being sick, keep getting on the mat, keep getting after it. You should be trying to make everybody else quit, like it was just this dominance thing constantly. And so that does kind of rise up every now and then. And I just have to talk myself down.
No, I'm with you 100%.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I feel like there's good and bad to that. We can be too gentle with people so they don't understand like this is serious business, but we can also be old school harsh and then wonder why we only have 4 people in a class.
Well, and that's what
well, I was going to ask, how do you find the balance in that, right? How do you, for the hobby, for the guys that want to go hard, for the guys that want to compete, for, your competition teams, and then the hobbyists that are coming in 2-3 times a week, that are there for the community a lot more than maybe
for sure
fighting.
Yeah, they're there for that community, right? They're there because when was the last time they had human contact? They might work from home. A lot of people work from home nowadays, or they go to work and they stay in a cubicle all day. They don't talk to anybody except for maybe people on the phone. They don't have face-to-face, and they definitely don't have, human contact, touch, And so they're there for the community and for all the good things that they're getting out of jiu-jitsu. They're losing weight, they're getting in shape, they're meeting people, and it's good mentally, right? Like they face the challenge and they do something hard, and they so for me, there's 2 things. One is I'm at competition team every morning. So we have competition team from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. every morning for jiu-jitsu. I'm there, and that's where I kind of get that side of myself out. So I can be harsh on those guys. I can be direct with those guys, and they're direct with me. It's a true team environment. There's no one person that's God, And so if I think they're slacking, I call them on it. If they see me slacking, they call me on it, because we all know there's places in jiu-jitsu, even in a comp team practice, where you can chill. You can get to a good spot and just be like, all right, got my frames in place, got inside, I got the inside space. I'm just going to relax here. But you should be hunting submissions, because that's the point, you should be getting after it. And so in that environment, I'm harsh. I'm hard on them. I'm hard on myself. The voice that's inside me that's talking trash to me, they hear, so I let them have it, and they do the same. And we push each other, drive each other hard, and push each other to the point where you feel like you can't get any more out of yourself. And then we demand one more. And so I'm good so that kind of scratches that itch. And then when I train with the people who are only there 2 times or 3 times a week, and they don't want to compete, they want the health benefits of jiu-jitsu, they want the community benefits of jiu-jitsu, I will stress to them that, hey man, like, I need you to get this, because if you have to use this to defend yourself or your family, we got to have this down, man. I need you to push through. And I'll just my wife was a midwife prior to becoming a nurse. And so she caught over 100 babies. She delivered over 100 babies. And so she calls it midwifing. She's like, you're a good midwife. You just don't know it. And what I'll do is I'll just talk them through it. I'll just talk, like, they're in a bad spot. I won't let them get out of it. I won't let them tap out of a bad spot. I make them stay in it. I can see the panic. I know exactly what they're feeling. We all do, right? We've all been there. And I'll just talk them through it. I'm like, listen, man, this is really important for you right now. You're doing something really hard, but the satisfaction that you're going to get from doing something really hard is going to be immeasurable. This is the benefit of jiu-jitsu right now, where you're at, working your way through this, training your way through this is the most important thing you're going to do all day. This is the hardest thing you're going to do all day, and it's the most important thing. And so I talk them through it in that way, and I kind of guide them into kind of scratching the surface of the hard stuff. And sometimes they go in. Like once I ease them into it, then they're hooked, because the body craves that adrenaline. The body loves adrenaline, right? And so once I get them to understand that, yeah, man, it's hard. It's difficult. It's never not going to be difficult. One day you're going to be a black belt and it's still going to suck. And that's just because it's jiu-jitsu. It's a challenge. It's going to constantly challenge you. And just because you get to the next level doesn't mean that suddenly there's nothing to do there. Now it's like climbing a mountain. You get to the next level, you think that was the peak, but you get to that level and you're like, oh man, wait, there was a whole other mountain behind this one I just couldn't see because of this one. And so I tell them that kind of stuff all the time, and I talk them into craving the adversity and craving the challenge. And that's been, for me, that's been my goal and my objective as a coach when coaching people outside of competition, is to get them to that point where they just crave the difficult stuff. But I do it in a way. One of the things that I do, or we do within the Straight Blast Gym, is we don't teach. I think Six Blades does it too, right? Solo in
Sanji.
Jiu-Jitsu University, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where he talks about white to blue belt, you should really just focus on survive and escape and not worry too much about submissions. And that really influenced me a lot in my design for what we call our foundations program. So like new people fundamentals program. We don't really do a whole lot with submissions, but we do a lot with positions and escapes from those positions, surviving in a bad spot and then escaping. And so what happens is the person on top has to learn the position. So they got to learn how to hold you down and pin you and all those things. The person on bottom has to learn how to get the inside space and get out of there. And so one of the things we've taken out of there is kind of the risk of injury. So the only thing that's going to get hurt is their ego, because I'm not cranking on your arm. I'm not, getting an Americana from side control or anything like that, where especially white belt on white belt murder, I don't want to let two white belts crank on each other's arms. So,
so appealing.
But we have them do these positional rounds where they just learn to just stay in the suck, man. It's good for you. Embrace that suck, stay in it, dig through it, and just really focus on developing that growth mindset in them, where they see opportunities instead of problems. Like, this is an opportunity for you to confront your discomfort with being held down. You don't like being held down? Well, let's figure out how to not be held down. And the only way to figure that out is to continually put yourself back in there and work your way out. And we've had success with that. We had a lot of success with that as far as helping the hobbyists, the guys that only train a couple of times a week, get some serious reps in, do some serious work, not get hurt, and also understand that this is a life-saving skill, especially in the beginning, right? Because you have to think about the street and self-defense. You're learning life-saving skills, man, and you need to take it serious. And also it's an opportunity for you to push yourself in ways you've never been pushed. We have a friend of mine. He has a ketone ester company. Like, they developed this ester, you drink it puts you in ketosis, all this good stuff. And I've kind of been on the testing end of it. I've been his lab rat. But we talk about all the time. And he recently was in Washington, D.C. for a Department of Defense symposium on human performance. And for the first time since JFK, our military leadership are concerned that they wouldn't be able to field an army, because 70%, they estimate 70% of the young people between 17 and 24 cannot pass the military physical fitness test. Because what do they do all day? They sit on their butt, they game, they eat garbage food, they go to school, sit on their butt all day. Physical education, gym class is not required. You don't have to participate. You have to go, but you don't have to participate. So we are in jiu-jitsu, we are seeing the adult result of these kids. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing these guys come in. They don't do anything. They've never done anything hard. They've never challenged themselves. They've never pushed themselves. And so I frame it to them as, here's your chance, man. This is your chance to see what you're made of. This is your chance to push yourself beyond what you've ever pushed yourself. You're going to be tired. You're going to be nauseous. You're going to feel like quitting, and you can't. Like, if you don't show up for class, I will come to your house. I will load everybody in a van. We will roll mats up, and we will come to your house, and we will roll mats out in your living room and freaking make you roll. Like I'm not really going to do that, but they don't know that.
Wait.
And
wait, can you do that with Gary?
Yeah, come
Like,
on
can
over.
you load the van up and get Gary on the mat freaking, because I've been trying for I'm just messing around. But listen, I think what's really cool about this, what you're talking about right now is this: if you step back from all of this, what's happening right now, and you look at this evolution of jiu-jitsu over the last 3 decades, we went from this, you will never make it, suck it up, get your face pounded, to this opposite side of the spectrum, to actually you can do hard things. Here's how you do it. Here's the intelligence behind it. Here are the drills. This is what we've learned, how your body responds. Here is a specific curriculum that's designed to set you successful, to bring you not only the immediate wins or the small milestones, also to bring you the success long term over the next year, 2, 5, 10, and so on. Things have changed quite a bit. And I think what's interesting, at least for me, is the fact that there is this continuous growth. And a moment ago, you talked about sports like judo, wrestling, soccer, and you mentioned a handful others who have by far more, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess sophisticated or more developed systems. Do you think that that's because jiu-jitsu is relatively young sport?
Yes. Yeah. So the first Worlds was in the 90s.
Yeah.
Right? Like the first, So it's a young sport. So prior to the sport emphasis, jiu-jitsu was about fighting. It was about learning how to defend yourself. And it's Japanese in origin, right?
Yep.
So it's a battlefield art. So the first kind of record of jiu-jitsu is the 13th century Japan. But there are similar kind of evolutions in other cultures that we see. Grappling's always going to happen, especially when firearms aren't involved. So if all I have is a knife or a club, I've got to get close to you.
Yep.
And if I get close to you, what's the best way for you to keep me from stabbing you? Control my arm. Now we're grappling, right?
Yep.
So now we're hanging on to each other. And so any culture that's ever had to fight for its survival has had a grappling system in place for its warriors. So 13th century Japan, jiu-jitsu was a combination of multiple arts put together, kind of codified there. Goes to Brazil in the late 1800s, early 1900s, if I remember correctly. And it's still the judo was spelled J-I-U-D-O, right? So it's still that emphasis on fighting. And then it comes to the United States. Somewhere in there, it becomes a sport. It has a sports side. And then, so it's relatively young as far as the sports side of the house goes. The overwhelming influence has always been, this is a warrior art. This is a fighting art. This is an art based on, if you have a weapon, I might have a weapon. The stakes are high, and we've got to get it on. And so I think that mentality is always going to be there, and it should be there. It always should be there. Jiu-jitsu should always be about fighting first, and then the sport. And then the sport's how you stay in it forever. Like Chris said, you never will lose your curiosity and your love because of the sport, because it's endless. Like now they're talking about diagonal ashi, and I'm like, what? You know what I mean? Like there's, this is how you shut down this, and this is how you do that. And like this morning, I was teaching our intermediate and advanced students, we're going de la Hiva to honey hole, right? So de la Hiva sweep to a honey hole to scoop the far side leg, and now you got legs bundled up and all kinds of good stuff, right? That's always going to be there. But if one of my students were to get in a fight, I would not expect that to happen. I'm not going to, they better not pull De La Hiva and do some craziness. They need to stay on their feet and knock that dude out, or hit him with the earth, throw him hard and knock him out with the earth. But I think it's always going to be there. But like you said, man, that's a valid point, is that it's young. The sports side's young. And also you had a lack of kind of the sports science influence too. You had a lack of the influence from judo or wrestling or other arts. And now you're kind of seeing that. Like Chris says, Haueter says that jiu-jitsu is Japanese in origin, Brazilian modified, and American and European influence. And the American European influence is the hybrid, where we bring in the wrestling, we bring in the judo, we bring in those training methods too of drilling. I know Galvao wrote the book Drill to Win, and his instructor, I can't remember his instructor's name now. Oh man. But the Mendez brothers were influenced by him as well. Basically, it's Ichikomi. So he did like a Ichikomi approach to drilling sequences and drilling like say you're going to do like a knee cut guard pass into a back step, and you would just do that 100, 300, 400, 500 times in a training session. So that element was there. It just wasn't as much of an influence back then. But also that might be why you see guys who train like that were dominant. Those guys won. And so now, though, I think we're at a point now, and two, open source, right? The internet, if a kid wants to learn a drill, she just goes on YouTube, punches in guard pass drill, and there's probably 50 things pop up that they can work on immediately.
Yeah. I had a guy last night that signed up, and he was like, I guess, but the one thing as he was walking out, he was like, but you can't do this on your own. There's nothing to do by yourself. And I was like, come here. We'll look at some stuff. I got there's tons of stuff to show you,
But again, we are talking about evolution of this art sport, because again, 30 years ago, you said itself, you had to drive an hour to the academy, and a blue belt was the desired guy to see. Today there's black belts everywhere, regardless of their skill, but the experience and the knowledge there that you can learn from somebody. And then I keep saying this, like this right here is one of the most powerful tools we have. Everything is accessible. There's no secrets. There is zero secrets. It's really
zero secrets.
And I feel like as instructors, our job, and Phil, I'm curious what you think about this, but as instructors, our job is not necessarily to give people the techniques, because they can look them up. You can go on YouTube and find the techniques. Our job is to give them the tools, the intelligence behind it, the concepts, allow them to, or help them understand how this works mechanically. And part of this journey is really self-discovery at this point. Like, teaching classes are very different than what it was 20 years ago,
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree, man. I think, in wrestling, I totally agree. When somebody comes in, I'm trying to make them a self-coach. I'm trying to help them understand how to coach themselves. And so one thing I do with intermediate and advanced classes is I ask for feedback, because I'll have a couple black belts. There'll be a few black belts on the mat when I teach, a bunch of brown belts. They're all competitive, highly skilled. Like this morning, I had a female black belt who has competed. She was just in Illinois, competed at, I think it's Midwest Finishers was the name of the tournament. She just competed there. She also, a couple weeks before that, had a pro MMA fight. So she's an active competitor, competing as often as possible. She's on the mat, couple brown belts, probably 4 or 5 purple belts that are all competitive, compete frequently, and then a handful of blue and white belts. I'll ask for their input. I'll ask for them like, hey, this is what I'm teaching. Do you have anything to add? And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. But the point of doing that, though, is to stress to the white and blue belts that haven't been with me for very long that you're expected to have input. You're expected to be thinking about this. I want to hear what you think, what problems you're seeing, or how you're solving those problems. And because you need to know how to coach yourself, you have to understand. And one of the ways that I get there with these guys is I stress fundamentals. So in wrestling, you have your 7 basic skills, if I recall correctly, right? So, and those are all based around movements. They're not, here's a single leg, or here's a technique, or here's a crab ride, or whatever. It's like, stance and posture, footwork, level change, those types of things, back arch, lift, those things. So in judo, you have six fundamentals. The difference between judo and wrestling is that judo considers gripping to be a fundamental, because you're always going to be in the gi with that. So gripping is a fundamental skill. but it's the same footwork, kazushi, off balancing, all these things it's not a technique. It's a principle that you have to understand, and then you can take off from there. And so for me with jiu-jitsu, I stress with these guys, listen, I don't care what technique you use. It does not matter to me. What matters to me is that you're checking the boxes on fundamentals. What are the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu? What does everything boil down to? And maybe it's a little too reductionist. I had these conversations with Adam Singer. He's a coach in SPG Athens.
Yep. We've had Adam on.
We've had him on. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. You guys have had those guys on.
Mm-hmm.
So Adam's brilliant. Like, he's a genius. And I'm not even kidding. He's a scientist and he's incredibly intelligent. And we'll have these conversations. And sometimes Adam's like, I think that's a little too reductionist, but let's keep working with it. So here's where I'm at now. For me, the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu are base, posture, connection, and position. So base, we're always going to be fighting for attacking or protecting base and posture. Because if I win those two pieces, doesn't matter how I do it. If I upset your base and I upset your posture, I'm in control of you, right? Connection is, how do I attach to you? Not only do I attach to you, but how do I attach to the earth, right? So base, right? But also, how do I attach to myself? Like, how am I connecting, like say De La Hiva, right? Like, I'm wrapping the arm back around and connecting back to myself and then controlling. And then finally, position. And the positions, there's 8 basic positions, right, in jiu-jitsu. And then it's just variations, right? Like boxing, 4 basic punches, jab, cross, hook, uppercut, variations, but it's still going to come down to the 4 basic punches. In jiu-jitsu, there's 8 basic places we can be, and then there's variations, right? But just 8 places. So let me stress these things to you. Let me get you to understand that if you are in trouble, how's your base? How's your posture? Right? Correct your base and posture. No matter how you do it, correct your base and posture. If you are on the attack, then you need to be attacking base and posture. So from an old school perspective, it could be mount, right? Like, I have mounts. I am based and postured on you. You need to disrupt my base and posture to escape. Doesn't matter how you do it. The techniques are going to vary, and the techniques are going to be specific to what you're good at, but base and posture is what you have to attack. Now, if I wanted to teach my students, say, an X-guard sweep, right? So now we're going more new school. So X-guard sweep, I've got your near side leg attached. I've got my X in place. I can't seem to get the sweep to work. Well, why not? Oh, okay, wait. I'm not connected to them enough. So I need to get my leg pushed up tight underneath of their hips, and my other leg needs to be down tight against the bottom of their leg. So now I've got maximum connection. So every time I move a little bit, they move a lot. Now I can start to get my sweep, because now I can attack base. Every time I move my leg underneath their hips, their base shifts. I see them have to adjust. Got you. Now I just need to get your posture. How do I get your posture? I'm going to off base you a little bit and catch that collar and pull you down and connect my elbow back to my body, right? And so now I've got you. I've got base and I've got posture. Now I can do my sweep from X guard into honey hole or into whatever, I want to do from there. So the techniques might be different, more modern, but the fundamentals don't change. The fundamentals, the principles that drive my jiu-jitsu remain the same. And so when we're coaching students, I just tell them that. I don't try to, like, I'll have guys come in and they're like, hey, man, I just saw this really cool thing. It's a leg attack. It's daily. This, or it's this inversion. Yeah, right. It's an inversion thing. And I'm going to go underneath and bolo to this spot and do this and do that. And I'm like, cool, man, do your thing. But when they get in trouble, I just ask them, listen, ask yourself, base, posture, connection, position, right? Are you attacking the base? Are you attacking their posture? Are you defending your base? Are you defending your posture? Those are 2 places where you're probably messing up. I don't have to know the technique. I just have to know the fundamentals. And so to get them to self-coach and self-correct, I just have them, and then the other mantra that I have them always think about is the 4 things they have to control. They have to control hands. They have to control the space or the distance. Then they have to control the positional fight. They have to get to a good position and then end it. That's it, right? If you do those 4 things while attacking base posture, controlling connection, and working your way to a position, you'll win, right? And if you don't win, that's cool. That's the beauty of jiu-jitsu, right? You just reset and start over. You know, you do the universal escape, which is a tap, you know, and then you start over. You go right back to it. But yeah, like you said, man, if we can get these students to become their own coaches and understand that we're more of a guide, you know, that is the beauty of coaching. I'm not teaching, I'm coaching. I'm not standing here going, do A, do B, do C. If things really go bad, then go to D and E. But I'm not doing that. I'm giving them principles and concepts that they can then build their own game out from. And I think I could be wrong, but I think that's the way forward for jiu-jitsu because I see it in other sports.
Well, and I was about to say this. If you look at other sports who are by far more developed, doesn't even have to be fighting sports or grappling sports, just any sport that is developed, the coach's role is really not to show how to do things, but it's more to show the way, how to create that path, how to walk that path. How do you maximize what you're already doing? Like if you look at, I don't know, Phil Jackson and Michael Jordan, Phil Jackson was not teaching Michael Jordan how to play basketball. It would be stupid.
No
Michael
way.
Jordan by far knows better how to do it. But what Phil Jackson was doing is maximizing him in the specific positions with the specific plays, with the specific situations, right? And I think this is where jiu-jitsu is going towards.
Yes. I agree 100%. I think the future too for competition side is strategy and tactics.
Yeah.
Because the techniques are going to be the techniques. They're going to be what they're going to be, but it's just learning how to come up with a strategy or a tactic for a specific opponent, similar to boxing, MMA, Muay Thai, judo, even judo. You know, you have enough footage out there, you can study your opponent, then you can have a good coach help you come up with a strategy to negate what they do and put them into your pocket, put them into what you want to do. And I think that's going to be the way too for competition. We'll see more of that. But yeah, it's really cool, and it's like you said, so in a different world, like clearing rooms and like searching for a bad guy in a house or something like that, it can be overwhelming and incredibly complicated because there's all these doors and windows and all this other stuff. But if you say, listen, all a wall is an angle. And so going through a house, it's either a vertical line that you have to work around or horizontal line or diagonal variations, but that's it. And once you learn how to kind of play that game of searching around corners and moving around doors and walls and windows and things like that, once you understand that, now you just play the game. But if you don't understand conceptually how to look at a car or a house or whatever it is and just see angles, if you just see doors and walls and these things, you'll forever be confused. You will forever be overwhelmed because, well, there's a door here, but there's a door there. And, oh, man, in between those two doors is another door that's open, and I don't know what's there.
Yeah.
Well, man, just angles. Work the angles, maximize the angles. And same with jiu-jitsu, right? If you don't understand the principles and concepts that underlie everything, you will continually be confused. But if you can always go back to, well, wait a second, man, I'm in trouble here, but I'm in trouble because I let them take my base and posture. So let me restore and defend my base and posture and then start attacking theirs simultaneously. You'll be back on track.
Yeah.
You know, clear up the confusion.
I love it. And listen, like we've been at this for an hour. We didn't even touch any of the law enforcement and all the weapon retention. That huge passion of ours. No. Listen, that just means you need to come back. Yep. That just means you need to come back. That's what that means.
I would love it, man.
But what a great conversation. But listen, before we get to the kind of the ending part of the episode, I do want to ask you, going back all the way to the very beginning. You got you training with Paul. You training with Hickson. You get a seminar with Hickson. You getting connected with Chris and all the other things. you dipping your toes into this jiu-jitsu craziness. Do you realize at that time, way back, take yourself back, do you realize the magnitude of the names and the situation that you're surrounded by and what you do in your life today?
I did not back then. I met my second seminar was Megaton Diaz, and I had no idea. I had no idea. I just knew he was a jiu-jitsu black belt. And those guys were like archangels. They're just, you're only going to see them when it's serious, and the rest of the time you're going to be with a blue belt. And so I had no idea. I really didn't. I was just on a mission to be a really good martial artist. I just was in love with it, in love with training and just learning something new, just getting my mind blown daily, just on a daily basis, just having my brain just go, and then I have notebooks and stacks of journals, training journals, just back then that, if I could go back and realize who I'm sitting with, I would have had such better questions. I would have made so much better use of my time.
But this brings us to the interesting kind of a question or a thought, is that often we put in these situations of these opportunities to hang out with some of these individuals. And they might not, I'm not even talking about somebody who's by far more experienced, but even talking to you right now, it is an opportunity that 20 years from now, we're going to have a very different perspective than we have today at this particular moment. And the reason why I'm saying this, I'm bringing it back to the Chris Haueter seminar that we had at my academy here last week or this weekend. Many students who were on the mat, they didn't realize the magnitude of Chris.
They have no idea.
There's some people that didn't know who he was at all.
They've read about it. They saw his videos. They know he's a character. They knew it was going to be entertaining and funny, and they're going to learn jiu-jitsu. But they don't comprehend the weight of that name when he steps on the mat. This is the guy who literally pioneered what we do today. And
they have no idea.
And here's the mind-blowing part for me. And I was telling this to a lot of my students after the seminar. Very likely, this was first and the last time they might be meeting him, because a next opportunity like this might not present itself. It might just not happen. So, when we find ourselves in these positions, in these unique situations, just freaking jump on it. Don't think. Don't. You're gonna be regretting this. I don't
remember. We had a seminar here. I don't remember who it was with now, but you were like, "Did you roll with them yet?" And I was like, no, I'm, that's a celebrity of sorts, right? And you were like, no, just get over there. Be selfish. Get your time in. Go learn something. Get over there.
And I think I said this on the show in the previous episodes, but way back in the day, I was a white belt. Either white or blue, I don't remember. But it was beginning of my journey. And Hickson Gracie came to Illinois. And he was about an hour and a half from me, and this is 20 years back, right? And his seminar was $400. This is 20 years ago. And I was like, and somebody told me about this. And I was like, hell no, I'm not paying $400 for the seminar. Are you out of your mind? Man, I don't live with regrets. But that's one that I do have, because little I knew this was first and the last time I had the opportunity to meet Hickson. And I would love to have him on the show. If anybody out there knows Hickson, I want to have him on the show. But it never happened. 20 years later, and I'm still here, freaking pounding my head because I should have done it.
And then back then, he still rolled with everybody.
Oh, I know.
Because he wasn't.
And it was like a 4-hour seminar, wasn't it? I mean, you've attended them.
It was a long seminar. He rolled with everybody. He rolled with me. I know now what happened, but at the time I had no idea. He tapped me with a triangle without using his hands. Just
somebody
Matt Thornton.
Literally.
Yeah, when we had Matt on, he said that the seminar. I don't know if it was the same one, but the one he went to when he got there a little late. Yeah, and Hickson was rolling without his hands, tapping people out, and then because Matt's so big. Hickson took one arm out
Yeah.
and kept the other one in.
Yeah. He's like, yeah, you're freaking 6'10". I'll use one arm. I'll give you that. And what Hickson's like 5'8", 5'9".
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, he just legend. But yeah, man, take advantage of those opportunities and just like, I'll ask, like I was mentioning earlier, I'll ask the upper belts in the class, hey man, what do you think? What's your input? What do you have to say about this? What would you offer to the class for performance points or cues, as they're training this? But I'll ask everybody, when I train with people, roll with people, or just hang out or whatever, I'm always asking questions now because I've learned the hard way that you just don't know who you're sitting next to.
Yep.
You don't know how much value they could bring to you and what kind of connection you can make with them, where down the road it could be mutually beneficial, where you have a training partner, you have a friend, that somewhere down the road it comes back to help you and it's coming back to your benefit. But there's so many guys out there now. There's competitive blue belts. I have friends that are blue belts that have competed at Pan. They've won Pans and Worlds and purple belts and all these other guys. So gone are the days where if I don't know their name or I haven't heard their name or they're not some celebrity, so to speak, in the jiu-jitsu world, it's like, what are they going to tell me that I don't already know? I'm a black belt or I'm friends with Chris Haueter. I can call Chris Haueter right now and ask him, if I wanted to know that. Those days are gone. That was stupid on my part and arrogance on my part because there's just so many good people out here, good athletes and people with input, people that have things they can tell you that will improve your game, that to assume that they can't help you just because they're not whatever. That's a mistake. There's a lot of good people walking around now, man. You would never even know. Like, what does Rogan call them? The nerd assassins. It's like, and Thomas, you'll remember, right? When we started jiu-jitsu, a lot of the jiu-jitsu guys look like killers.
Oh yeah.
Like, right?
Oh yeah. You knew. You saw him, was like, damn, I don't want to. Nah, come on.
Yeah, right.
And
first time I saw Hickson, when Hickson walked into the seminar in Miami, I was like, all right, I've seen this look before. Yeah. I've been in wrestling rooms my whole life. I've been around All-Americans and Penn State dudes and everything. Like I recognize a lion when he walks in. Like Hickson walked in, it was like no mistake. Like he walked in, like you just knew.
He owned the room.
You would go to jiu-jitsu places to train or judo places to train, and they look like there's a reason they say that's a judo guy, right? Yeah. Like they know, But nowadays it's hard to say, man.
It's like the guy who's the smallest.
Look at Mikey.
Yeah, the guy who's smallest in the room and smiles the most will freaking mop the floor with you.
And it's awesome, and there's nothing you can do about it. You just gotta laugh, and then as soon as it's over, like, hey man, how'd you do that? Show me what's up. Tell me, help me. Yeah. So I think. But man, I apologize we didn't get to everything.
No, absolutely not. Like I said, it gives us a reason to bring you back at some point. But listen, before we wrap this up, there's this thing that we do every episode. And Gary's going to take a lead on this, but a guest who was sitting in your seat in the previous episode asked a question without knowing that without knowing who will be answering it. Right? There's a kind of element of surprise here, jiu-jitsu style. Gary's going to take a lead on this. This actually might be interesting.
Yeah. So Amy Campo was here last, fresh off of
awesome performance at ADCC, right?
ADCC championship. Yes. Yeah. And she wants to know, do you believe increasing your spiritual maturity increases your jiu-jitsu maturity? She's deep.
I think so. Yeah, it's deep, man, and it's an important piece of it. I think there's a reason why the samurai over time became artists, gardeners. They had the tea ceremony, all those things, calligraphy. They wanted to express that artistic side of themselves. And I think that's tied into your spirituality. I think there's so much to it that we can't explain. And no matter how much we study the brain and we try to understand, and I just think we're never going to be able to explain it. And I think we can't deny it either, that I think we all have that side of us. There's like a physical, mental, mental, emotional, maybe that's could be one category, and a spiritual side. And I think that spiritual side, as you deepen that side of yourself, as you work on that side of yourself, which we all do, right? We have to work on that to improve your jiu-jitsu. It's going to, and I think too, jiu-jitsu will improve that side of you, because what does every spiritual practice known to man have in common? Like in Buddhism, what is like a common theme in Buddhism, which is suffering, right? There's this part of like putting yourself in difficult places, fasting, sitting, meditating, all these things where you take yourself out of your comfort zone. Christianity has an element of that, even, like in Islam, there's a piece of that in there too. Like in every major spiritual study, there's a piece that says it's necessary for you to suffer to become better. And so jiu-jitsu is all about suffering. Like it really is. Yeah. There are some days where it's just all suffering. And so, yeah, man, I think as you become more comfortable in that side of things, as you become more comfortable in discomfort, I think there is a spiritual deepening, whether you intend it or not. So
no, yeah. I love it, and I 100% agree with it. And before we wrap this up, I want to tell you a quick story from literally last night. One of my students comes up to me after open training, after some rounds and sessions, and he's, clearly exhausted, and he sits down and he's like, "You okay?" He goes like, I'm good. And I was like, "What's going on?" I was like, "Listen, we're going to come up with a new goal for me." I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, Do you remember the goal that you gave me like a couple months ago? And framing this in, this is a student who's in his 50s. He had a hard time going multiple rounds in the RŌL. And then there is this, a mental approach. I cannot do this. This is hard. This is difficult. How do I hang out with the young guys and all that, right? It's a lot of that is in his mind. And we gave him a goal. I gave him a goal. Listen, you need to go 3 consecutive rounds. Nonstop, I don't care. You need to find a way to survive 3 rounds. Last night, he comes up to me. He's like, we need to give me a new goal. Why? I just went 5 rounds nonstop. And I was like, I think you already gave yourself a new goal. Like, yeah, that's already been established. Okay, what are we doing next? Where are we going? So, that's awesome. If you're listening to this, you know who you are. We're not going to drop names, but listen, these moments like that, this is what I love. Going above and beyond. You can. This is Gary's quote. You can do hard things. You can.
Yes.
It's all here. Yeah. This is stopping us. Our head is stopping us. It's not our bodies. We can always push more. We can always get one step further, one step at a time, and we can do really, in my mind, amazing things.
Yeah, I agree, man, 100%.
Paul, over an hour. Hanging out with us.
This was an easy one, man.
This was
some of them we sit here about 27 minutes in and you're like, whoo, how are we going to get through this?
No, for sure. We need to have you back. But before we wrap this up, where can people find you? If anybody wants to reach out to you directly and learn a little bit more about you, where are you at? Yeah. Where, are you on social media, websites, locations? Where are you at, Paul?
Yeah, I am on social media. I'm primarily on Instagram. So Paul_Sharp_SPG. That's where you'll find me on Instagram. I post a lot of self-defense oriented stuff from jiu-jitsu. And then also you can find me at SPG Idaho. I'm in Boise, and that's where I'm based. So if you guys ever are in the area, please, man, stop in and train with us. I'd love it.
Sweet. Awesome. Excellent. I always say if you are visiting Chicago, let us know.
Yes.
Let us know.
Yeah, man, for sure. My daughter's, my kids still live out there, so for sure I'll be out there.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah, then don't come visit us. Man. Visit them, but you stop by. See? There's a whole plan. There's a whole plan.
Yeah, there's a plan. Yeah, exactly.
But let's keep in touch. And again, we appreciate you being here, sharing all the wisdom, knowledge, and your experience. What a great conversation. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to RŌL Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.